Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, or it could be whiskey with an analyst reading a spreadsheet, linking crime events, identifying a series, and getting the latest scoop on association news and training. So please don't be that analyst and join us as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
Thank you for joining me. I hope many aspects of your life are progressing. My name is Jason Elder, and today our guest has 14 years of law enforcement analysis experience. She started as a criminal intelligence analyst with Phoenix Police Department and then moved on to the Phoenix Fire Department. She holds a master's degree of art forensic psychology. She is the 2022 Analytic Product Award winner from Arizona Association of Crime Analysts. From the great copper state of Arizona, please welcome Jennifer Hill. Jennifer, how are we doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Excellent. It was nice meeting you and talking to you yesterday during the prep call, and fresh off that Super Bowl that they had in Arizona where you had a chance to do your thing with the Super Bowl. And so that's got to be pretty exciting.
It was very exciting. It was a great experience and collaboration with other analysts.
All right, we'll get into that a little bit. Certainly want to talk about your transition from the police department to the fire department. A little bit of housekeeping before I get started here. We are going to have a call-in segment today. We are going to play favorite first job. So if you have a favorite first job, call in and tell us about your favorite first job. So, all right, with that being said, Jennifer, how did you discover the law enforcement analysis profession?
So it's actually interesting. When I first started my criminal justice degree, I wanted to be a crime scene investigator. And the way the path went for me, the intelligence analyst field just kind of called out to me. I was a volunteer with Avondale Police Department, and obviously, as you can imagine, the volunteer pool is a little bit older and just kind of people who are trying to get out of the house. So when I started volunteering with them, their crime analyst quit, and I was pretty much the only person that was available who knew how to use a computer. So that was how it all started for me as a volunteer with Avondale PD, and then they hired the amazing Josie Phillips as the crime analyst over there, and then I just kind of moved on to different aspects, but always from that point on stayed in the criminal intelligence analyst field.
Yeah. Now, why did you choose to volunteer for the department in the first place?
So I was going to school for criminal justice, and I thought it would be a good idea to kind of get some exposure to the different parts of the criminal justice field. And they had a volunteer opportunity, and the school I was going to didn't have an internship program, but the department was awesome in that it would let me go wherever I wanted to go to get that experience, to see, narrow down what part of criminal justice I wanted to get involved in. So I started in as covering for the crime analyst that had left, and that was just doing crime stats and comp stat reports and different UCR stuff. And then after they hired Josie, I actually went into the sex offender unit and helped the detective over there. And it was crazy because she was like, "You are so good at compiling large amounts of information. You should really think about doing something like that." And so I started looking into it a little bit more and just kind of refining my skills as I moved through my criminal justice program, and crime analysis was exactly what I wanted to do, and I knew it at that point.
So you never became an analyst there at Avondale. You just stayed as the volunteer.
I was never a paid employee, but I did volunteer there through my entire undergraduate degree program.
That's still impressive, because what are you, like 19, 20?
No. No.
Yeah. So I do find it fascinating just looking at your resume here that you started out in ITT Tech. Did you have aspirations to just get a 2-year degree and then see where the criminal justice field took you? Because obviously, I think a lot of people, if they're going to college right away, they're looking at a 4-year degree and going that way. So I'm interested to see what your experience was with getting the associate's degree first.
Right. So I wanted to see where the criminal justice program would take me. And as you can
Hmm.
tell from my resume, I switched over to psychology because after working in the sex offender unit with that detective, I really was interested in criminology and the criminal mind and what made them tick. Obviously, the sex offender is a very complex type of offender that you're looking at, but I was interested in so what she did was she assessed the risk level of the offenders based on the information that I compiled for her. And I really loved that analysis of the data. And I thought, man, I would really love to do like a court type of mental health assessment and things like that. But the criminal behavior part of psychology just really called to me. So I switched from criminal justice to psychology, and forensic psychology is the study of criminal behavior. So that's kind of how my college degree program morphed.
That's interesting. You concentration on treatment and that aspect of it. How do you feel that the master's degree, the study in psychology, helped you later become an analyst?
So I can't say that I use it like in my daily job, but there are a lot of times when I'm looking at the information that comes from an incident and I'm thinking to myself, what kind of person would want to do this? Is it personal? Is it a stranger danger kind of thing? Like what made that person tick to commit this crime? So I
Mhm.
have used a lot of that psychology education, but I mean, realistically, you can take whatever path you want, and that educational experience will always be useful to you.
Yeah. No, that is fascinating that that's your perspective too, because I've talked about this a couple of times on the show now. Is this idea that analysts sometimes don't get beyond the data, right? We get assigned a task, we create a report, we create products. They're all just different forms of data, and sometimes we don't have to stop and think about that each one of those dots on a map is a victim, or each one of those dots on the map is a burglarized home. For you to be thinking about this idea of like, okay, what's going on? What's the thought process between both the suspect and victim as you're analyzing these crimes?
Yeah, that's exactly what I do. Well, especially right now in my current position, I definitely use it more than I ever have before, but I think it's important to think about more than just the data, just exactly like you said.
Mhm. All right. So then you finish volunteering at Avondale and then become the administrative assistant at Arizona Department of Public Safety. So at this point in time, had you decided that you wanted to be an analyst and took this administrative assistant role as a stepping stone to get to that goal, or were you still exploring other avenues?
No, absolutely. I was planning my 5-year goal when I applied for DPS. It was to get my foot in the door, and they just so happened to have a position open in their sex offender unit, and it was a primarily for compliance. So you basically verify the address of the sex offender annually, which is a state statute, and through that, I actually wound up helping the U.S. Marshal Task Force in locating absconded offenders just because I had that natural desire to find people, even though my supervisor kept telling me we're only there to verify their address. It just didn't work like that for me. That's not how my brain was working. So after I started helping the U.S. Marshal Task Force in locating absconded sex offenders, a position came up as an IRS, an intelligence research specialist, which is the next stepping stone after the administrative assistant position. And it was for the missing and exploited children clearinghouse manager, which is still looking for people. You're just not looking for sex offenders anymore. I looked for trafficked juveniles, runaways. I actually built the state database to house the historical information for missing and exploited children. So that was a great opportunity for me to kind of get my foot under me as far as what I can do with finding people and analysis and taking data. And it really helped me to get into the criminal intelligence analyst position.
Yeah, that is excellent. As I look at your resume, it just seems like that was the pathway for you,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense. You volunteer, and then huge opening opportunity comes up, and then you become admin assistant, huge opportunity comes up there, and then you move your way on to the IRS, like you
And
mentioned.
I've been very fortunate in my career that these opportunities have presented themselves, and I feel like it's just kind of moved me along that career
Yeah,
path that I've had in my
yeah,
head that I wanted to work towards. So, and it was
yeah.
great because that position was housed at the ACTIC, which is the Arizona Counterterrorism Center. So I was able to get my feet wet with some terrorism related intelligence stuff. I got to work with a lot of agencies that have a seat at the ACTIC, and that
Mhm.
was just a great opportunity for me to kind of get some exposure to actual intelligence analysts as I knew I was working my way to that position.
Yeah, and just when you get an opportunity to work at some of these centers or task force and it's multi-jurisdictional, I mean, you get exposed to a variety of people working from a variety of agencies, and the opportunities can really open up from there.
Absolutely.
So then you leave there, and then you become a criminal intelligence analyst with the police department. Then, as you're going through this, and you're got a couple of years under your belt with the state there, why did you transfer from the state there to Phoenix PD?
So I was actually on the analyst list for both DPS and Phoenix PD, and I just thought the analyst position that Phoenix PD had advertised for was intriguing to me because I've always been interested in the drug trafficking side of intelligence analysis. So the particular position that came open to Phoenix PD it was a contract position, but it was assigned to the HIDA, which is the Arizona Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. So
Hmm.
I was assigned to DEB, which is the Drug Enforcement Bureau at Phoenix PD, and they embedded me with the Commercial Narcotics Unit at Sky Harbor Airport. And when I read that job description and that I would be assisting with money laundering and drug trafficking cases. I just thought that would be a great next step for my career and to get some different experience because, DPS doesn't really their type of caseload is different than a local agency. So I thought it would be a better career move for me to go to Phoenix PD.
Yeah. Now, did you know anybody, the hiring manager, or anybody from the police department or HIDA before you applied for the position?
So the good part about working at the ACTIC was that they have a analytical unit in the watch center where I was. So I did get to expose myself to some of the intelligence analysts and the supervisors over there so that when I applied for it, they kind of knew who I was and the type of work that I did before. And I think that was a really great opportunity for me to set myself apart from the other applicants.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. It's almost like you're being spoken for, even though maybe they don't use that term anymore. That's why folks that ask me about how can they get in the field, I just said get your foot in the door somewhere, doing something similar to what you did with your volunteer work and the assistant position. And then people that see what you do, how you conduct yourself, and that you can be an asset to the team like that. They all talk. They all, people will
Ab-
check references and do all that. And that I'm sure do you believe that's what happened in your case?
I absolutely 100%. Like, I've never shied away from starting at the bottom of anything and working hard to show people, what I have to offer. And I'm always going above and beyond. Like, even in any position I've had, I've never just stopped at the job that I was hired for. I've always tried to help other people whether it be trying to educate them on something or just helping because I knew how to do it and they didn't. I just don't really see any lines. And that's never gotten me into trouble. I feel like it's only helped me progress through my career and meet a lot of people and get involved in a lot of different projects. And I think that's just exactly how I see my career progressing.
So you're here with the police department for 2 years. Looking back, what comes to mind when you think of those 2 years in the police department?
Oh, they were so fun. It was a great unit that I worked with at the airport. They were really fun. I learned that there is value into embedding yourself with the people that you're supporting. I sat in the office with them when they interdicted commercial passengers. I was there to say they're lying. That story doesn't make any sense. Here's why. As they were interviewing them, I could pull up everything that they were saying and discredit it, which just gave so much to the investigation and what they were able to do while they had those people in front of them. So I know that you've had some callers say it before, but get out of your office, embed yourself with the people you work with so that you can really help them and know how to help them because you're with them and you can see what they need.
So is it like a sample of some data that you would come up, like if they were lying about where they were headed or where they were going or where they were from?
I think that the primary thing for me, when they would try to explain why they had large amounts of currency on them, it was always that they were a business owner. They were always buying a car. They were always like their explanation for why they had that money was always so easy for me to just look on the corporation commission and say, you do not own a business, or it is not, it's not adding up. So I think that was the primary quick way for me to look at something where you're not requesting phone information or dumping a phone or doing anything that takes time to get the approval. You're just open source searching. I think their social media accounts total up for them. If you're dealing drugs on your Facebook page, we're probably gonna bring it up in the interview. So,
Yeah. So as you're talking there, I am envisioning, I don't know if you saw the movie Wolf of Wall Street, where
I did.
they're like taping the bags of cocaine
Yep.
to the people as to try to get them. That's probably like what's the largest amount of drugs that you saw someone trying to get through an airport?
For me, I think it was the extremely creative ways that they tried to hide the drugs.
Yeah.
So they would peel apart the inside of the luggage and remold the inside of the suitcase to make it look like they had never opened it. And it was just like an art for them. And it was always entertaining for me to watch my detectives rip apart someone's suitcase to get to the drugs. It was quite entertaining.
And like, do you know how long it took me to do that?
Yeah, and obviously they didn't know it was there, right? Because that's always the plausible deniability. I had no idea that was there. I don't know how that got in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
you had all that time to pre-mold your suitcase. You had no idea it was in there.
Yeah, when I was at the Washington Baltimore HIDA, another analyst that I worked closely with, she had a case where she was working, the airport employees were buying tickets because they got a discount or got them free or whatever it is for different drug dealers. But the way it was in the system, if you just looked at it in the system, it was just the employees. But then there was like a different way that you actually had to see that it was actually the actual passenger was, the person that the employees were buying the tickets for.
Yeah,
And it turned to be a
absolutely.
whole different thing there that just, access and trying to move product from one end of the country to the other.
Yep, yeah.
So,
There was a lot of different tricks of the trade to get people on flights and try to keep them, below the radar. But if you know your job and you know what you're looking for, then you'll find them.
That's interesting. And I gotta believe the airport has to be so interesting because you are dealing with so many people at so many different stress levels. And it's like I worked at an amusement park, so I know what that chaos can be
Oh
like,
yeah,
and I
it
can only
was.
imagine.
It was like it was like an amusement park over there sometimes. And everybody seems to be their normal behavior seems to be a little off when they're at the airport just because so many people have anxiety from traveling.
Mm-hmm.
But I think some of my best stories were from the airport. Like they would chase people, like just walk up to them like, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And they would just take off. And it's like, why is he running? And there was an extremely large, tall man on my squad, and he watching him after on the cameras run through the airport, and the guy just basically ran into him like he was a wall and just bam right on the ground. It was quite the sight.
Oh man, and see that's another thing too that I would that would be fun is that you have so many cameras
Yep.
inside the
Oh
airport
yeah.
that you
Mm,
almost can link them all together to see the play-by-play and the whole
absolutely.
chase.
That's exactly what we did. It was very eventful.
Oh man, so that is interesting, and that's just it's fascinating because obviously the criminals still try to do it, and so it makes me wonder how often they get away with it.
Oh, I'm sure they can get away with it. It's just there's too many people to
Hmm.
contact them all. You have to just pick and choose.
Yeah,
I
that
mean,
is.
think about how many passengers there are in an airport in a day, and how
Yeah,
many of them are probably carrying something illegal.
yeah, yeah. And I think I've even didn't realize it until I got home that I had something in my bag. I think I had scissors the one time, and I was like, oh my gosh, I went through two different. I went there and back and didn't realize it until I got home that I had scissors in the bottom of my computer bag.
Yeah,
I was like,
it happens.
yeah. As I mentioned in your intro, you transition from Phoenix Police Department to the fire department. So I'm curious to see the story behind this transition.
Yeah, well, so with the PD, like I mentioned before, it was a contract position, so
Hmm.
I didn't get all the benefits that a city employee would get. So again, I used that position to get my foot in the door with the city of Phoenix. And you have a lot more job opportunities available to you if you're already a city of Phoenix employee. And I got an email for a position that they created at the fire department. It was for a task force, an arson task force, criminal intelligence analyst. And I thought, well, what fun would that be to work with fire and PD? Because everyone's always told me they don't get along very well. So that's got to be an entertaining work experience. So I interviewed for it, and lo and behold, they gave me the job.
Excellent. Now, what was the interview like? Was it a mixture of firefighter and police officers in the interview?
It was the supervisor for the fire side of the task force, and then
Hmm.
the Phoenix PD sergeant who was in charge of the detectives for the police side of the task force,
Hmm.
and someone else, I don't remember who it was, but it was basically the number ones for the fire and police side on the task force, and then I think they threw somebody else in there. I don't even remember who it was.
Hmm. Now, was this a brand new position?
So the task force isn't new, but they had reclassified an old position and kind of upgraded it to give it a little more responsibility and to attract someone with that criminal intelligence background.
So then let's get into some of your tasks because I think it is unique in the country. There's not a lot of analysts at fire departments. When we were talking yesterday, I was thinking of somebody. I was like, I know I interviewed one person, Jessica LeBlanc from Virginia, is also kind of made a similar transition that you did. But I'm curious your experience, like what kind of tasks are you asked to do? What was it like in the beginning as you transitioned from PD to this arson task force?
So primarily, I help the detectives with case support. So if there's any kind of suspect they have or a photo of a car, I'll exhaust my resources to try to help them find out who the suspect is to ID the person. Typically, I'll do like a workup on a suspect, bulletins. I got into a lot of mapping when I came over here. I wasn't a big GIS person before, but I've always loved maps. So
Mm-hmm.
the great thing about the fire department is they're just so, oh, you want to do that? Go ahead, take the class. We'll get you the software. What do you need? Tell us what you need to do your job and we'll get it for you. So they're so supportive over here, and it just makes it so much more fun to learn and do my job because they're like, oh, you want ArcGIS? All right, let's get it for you. And next day I had it and I was working on hotspot maps and map and fire activity and working on reports and monthly reports for the chain of command on both fire and PD to kind of get the word out there more about the task force and what they were doing because that wasn't really being done before. And I think
Mm-hmm.
they've had a lot more resources available to them, having people know that they're here and this is the work they're doing. So, I've done some maps for operations to kind of show them like, hey, if you have fires in this area, we're looking for a suspect. We know it's a hot spot. If we had any leads, I would give that information out to the detectives so that they could go try to find, that arsonist in that area. So it was really good because I was able to kind of create my own area of this is what I'm going to provide. And then from there, I kind of did a needs assessment for the task force and for the fire department on, how can they better benefit from having me here? Because my personality isn't to stay inside the box. So as soon as I got in here and I was like, all right, I got the task force thing down. Now what else can I do? And I started doing stats for different areas of the fire department that could benefit from analysis and looking at the cause and effect of how they change things. And then from there it was crazy because nobody realized how valuable fire data was until I came along and started sharing the fire data, and they're like, this is amazing. Like we could get funding for this now that we have this data to support why we need more positions or why we need to do things a certain way. So I think it was good that they brought someone on who had a variety of things in my background as far as analysis goes. So this way I could kind of create a better package for what we offer.
You mentioned the certain data in order to get a grant. What a good example of that? Some data that you came up with that allowed them to either hire more or get a grant or get more funding.
So I have a great example of the city of Phoenix has a program. It was a pilot program for gating alleys. It's called GAP, GAPP, Gated Alley Program Pilot. And the city was looking at different data sets and determining what alley segments should be gated to create a safer environment in the neighborhoods. And they had things like graffiti and dumping complaints and general crime in the area, but they couldn't narrow it down to the alley because of how they collect their information on the PD side. So when I came in here and I heard about that program, I'm like, well, we have a ton of fires in alleys. I feel like that should be a data set that they include. So I reached out to that program and I said, hey, I really think you guys would benefit from having fire data included in your weighted structure of how you determine what alley segments are going to have a gate installed. And they were like, wow, that's really great. Can you present us with some of your information so that we can see if it's useful or not? And the program that was a pilot before is now a permanent program.
Nice.
And I think that the expanding the data set really helped to justify and show how effective gating the alleys was. And that fire data is really important because you have utilities that run through the alley segments and transients who are starting fires that are spreading to private property. You're just victimizing a lot of people. So I think that was a great way that we used fire data where no one was really thinking about it like that before.
No, that's great. With the arson task force, is there a threshold or how do cases get assigned to the task force?
So the way the task force works is that if a fire captain on scene can determine what caused the fire, we don't get called because case closed, was an electrical fire, someone accidentally, left the pot on the stove and stuff like that, we don't get called for. But if the fire captain on scene can't determine what caused the fire, they'll call us to come out and do an origin and cause report, which is going to look into what are those ignition sources in the area? Can we narrow it? That's one side of it. The other side is if you have an obvious arson, there's surveillance video, witnesses, things that are telling them that someone set the fire intentionally, we're always called. And if we aren't, for whatever reason, the police department has a program called Auto Assign that patrol officer who responded to that fire can send that file over to us and say, hey, I think you guys need to look at this because I think it was arson. And then we'll give it to a detective to look at and make that determination and see if further follow-up is warranted.
All right. And so I'm just curious, and there's just probably something I should have looked up before. With Phoenix, how many arsons do they have in an average year?
So the thing about origin and cause analysis is in order to classify it as something, you have to rule out all the other ignition sources. So the number of arsons that we have that they would actually classify as arson are probably lower than what they actually are because you'd have to rule out so many other things and that's not what they do. So I would say we have a 15% arson rate for the calls that were dispatched as in the task force is dispatched on. We look at probably 500 to 600 fire investigations a year. So I would say 10 to 15% of those would be incendiary.
Okay. And because I think if I'm understanding you correctly, certainly there's going to be suspicious fires, for lack of a better word, but they haven't been certified as an arson to this point.
Yeah, and it could be that so vehicle fires is a great example because everybody thinks if their car is on fire, someone had to have done it intentionally. But there's electrical systems, there's gasoline, there's so many other things to the car. So you'd have to rule out that it didn't start in the engine compartment or some other component of electrical throughout the car. Sometimes if they don't have a witness or some kind of video to show where the fire started and the car is just completely destroyed, it's possible that they would probably say it's just undetermined. You just can't determine how that fire started.
Yeah, it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I realized how many car fires that are on the highway.
Yeah,
I
there's
had no
a lot.
idea then. I mean, it seemed like it was once a week in the Baltimore, DC area that there was a car fire, at least once a week.
And so I map, a lot of fires that we don't go on just because they're suspicious in nature. But I can tell you that from looking at the car fires we have on the highway, trailers carrying landscaping debris have got to be the most common because I think people just flick their cigarette butts out the window and then they fly into the debris in the landscaping trailer and poof, there you go, it's gone.
Interesting.
So don't flick your cigarette butts, people. It's bad for you. Bad for everybody.
There you go. Another reason not to smoke, right?
Exactly.
Hey y'all, it's Josie Blong from Salisbury Police Department. My public service announcement is that you are not as busy as you think you are. You just need better time management skills.
My name is Rachael Songalewski, and here is my public service announcement. Being a law enforcement analyst by trade who's definitely worked in the open source intelligence world, one of the things that has always driven me crazy is the amount of oversharing our world does. So my public service announcement would be to keep your business to yourself. Stop telling the world everything about you on social media because it near about always comes back to bite you. Maintain a professional image at all times. That is my recommendation.
This is Jennifer Loper. It's okay to fall apart sometimes. Tacos fall apart too, and we still love them.
You talked about mapping, you talked about just studying all the data for the fire department. Is there either a metric that you've created or certain data that you've honed in and polished over the years that has really been helpful?
Well, I think, people don't realize how much they have on their social media accounts.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that would be like having your family members and all the places you go posted publicly on your social media. I feel like the suspects that I have found, it was because their family members just put all of their business out there. And it's like, oh, look, there you are in front of your car that I'm looking for. Hey, how you doing? So, social media I don't particularly care for social media, but it is very beneficial when you are looking for someone and their associates that you just poke around in their social media.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about a case then. This brings us to your analyst badge story. And for those that may be new to the show, the analyst badge story is the career-defining case or project that an analyst works. And so for you, it's started in 2021 and finished in just this past year in 2022, but it deals with false reporting.
Right. And it actually Phoenix PD wasn't even the primary agency on this investigation. It was Tempe PD. But I stumbled across it because I was mapping fires, and we just had a ton of fire dispatches to a apartment complex in Phoenix where every time they went out there, they'd say there was nothing found. And I'm like, well, that's not normal. Like, why are they getting all of these calls to this apartment complex and never finding anything? So I started I started putting a timeline together of the calls, and the type of calls that they were ones that would elicit a large scale response. So like a large number of fire trucks, PD. So I was like, man, this is a waste of resources. What's going on here? So I started looking at the phone numbers and I started looking at the addresses, and then I started pulling data from fire and from PD, and I definitely, found that it was a false caller that we were dealing with, but the number of calls, the volume was just incredible. And I said, how the heck is our alarm room able to keep up with actual emergencies in our city, a city as big as Phoenix, and not say something about this? So I reached out to the alarm room and they're like, oh yeah, so they were really helpful with giving me the recordings to show it's the same person, even though they're calling from different numbers. And it was a 911 only phone number that he used, various ones. So it made it harder to track down who the person actually was. But during the course of this research of mine, I found out Tempe PD was already had a case open on the guy. So I was like, well, this is great. So the sergeant on the task force kept reminding me through this whole process that this is an arson task force. And why are we looking into a false caller? And I'm like, listen, I would say 95% of the calls were happening in Phoenix. They only had a couple on the highway or in Tempe. I was like, this is a big chunk of their case. We need to give them this information because it's going to help them. So he reached out to the detective, Brett Sauer, at Tempe, and we had a meeting with them, and I gave them my timeline and my workup and the waste of resources that we had going and all my stuff, and they were just like, this is great. So their crime analyst, Vanessa Brewer, is the one who actually nominated me for that award because of just the different aspects of it that I looked at, besides for the volume of calls, like the duration that our resources were out of service because they were responding to all of these fake calls. They couldn't obviously respond to real emergencies because we had so many units tied up for something that it wasn't even happening. So it was a really good case. It was fun to work. And I think I've had a couple of other timeline cases now where I realized, Geez, I guess I'm like the timeline person.
They do get fun. So what do you use for timelines?
I just use like PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah,
right.
like just the
Interesting.
regular word stuff, nothing fancy. But I've kind of tied in surveillance video clips and 911 calls and some other media that kind of paints the picture for things that I think kind of sets it apart from just your standard, list. Because the false call case for Tempe went on from like around May of 2021 through the end of December. So I mean, you're talking about, 6, 7 months of records to go through, there was a large volume of stuff to go through. So it's not something
Hmm.
you could just like line item on a Excel spreadsheet. Although I did do
Hmm.
that too, but pictorially, I'm a person who likes pictures. So timelines for me are really helpful.
All right. So how often was these false calls coming in?
So some of them would be five or six a day, and then
Wow.
it would be, sometimes, one or two. But there was a point where a day didn't go by where he wasn't calling at least once a day, if not 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, and so
So
he's using these cell phones that don't have a plan, that they're just the only thing you can do with them when they're charged is make the 911 call.
right, and the dispatcher can't call back, so he would call and make these statements and then hang up, and there was
Hmm.
no way for anybody to ask any other questions to get clarification on what was happening, which is what led to the large scale response.
So were you able to either forecast or get any kind of profile together based on his pattern of behavior or any information that you got from the data?
Yeah, we definitely did some predictive analysis there. Time of day, day of week. There was a particular time of day where he would call, and then there were certain days that were definitely busier than others. But there was quite a bit of randomness to his calls as well because he used several addresses. So while you could assume he was going to call in a particular apartment complex, you couldn't always guarantee it. So, but it wasn't an apartment complex that one of his family members lived in, and not being an official psychiatrist or anything like that, but having that profiling interest, I could say he was just really interested in watching all of the fire and PD show up when he
Hmm.
called.
Okay, so he would actually be on site when he made the calls.
We suspect so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that is interesting. And I have seen stories of arsonists and how they like to sit back and watch what they've created.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
and
can.
and we've definitely had quite a few arsonists that have done that very same thing and just set it on fire, and then they somehow to try to figure out how to insert themselves into the investigation, thinking that we won't suspect that it was them if they're trying to help or offering information or, it's like you almost want to look at that person more because it's like, why are
Yeah.
you trying to be so helpful? Like, I
Yeah.
actually
They got too close and got burnt. How about that?
yeah, that and that definitely happens. We don't have a whole lot of burn injuries that we respond to from our fire investigation scenes, but I can't say it's never happened.
Right. So then how did you catch this guy?
Well, I think it was a lot of stuff that I don't want to talk about because the case isn't officially closed.
Oh, okay. That's fair. But he has been arrested and the trial is upcoming.
Correct. Yes.
I got you. I got you. All right. So I guess any additional takeaways that you have regarding this case?
For this case, I think you never know how big the case is going to become. You might think it's small, but always organize all of your data and all of your information as you're going through researching because what I thought was going to be a very small checkbox, okay, we're done, turned out to be a 7 month long, just large amounts of data. So never underestimate the size of what your case could be.
Okay. This case got you the Analytical Product Award from the AACA. And did you know you were winning that award?
So the president called me to tell me that I should come to the award ceremony because I might be getting something, but he wouldn't tell me what the award was for or who nominated me for the award or anything like that. So,
And when you say president, you're not talking about Joe Biden, right?
no, I'm talking about the
Yeah,
president of the AACA.
yeah. I'm kidding. All right. So yeah, so he just said, "Hey, it's in your best interest to show up to this event."
Yeah, pretty much. And if you could please bring someone with you to take a picture of you, that would be great as well.
So you didn't even realize you were nominated or anything like that. It
No,
was
I had no idea anybody had nominated me. And I'm not super active in the analyst community where like people know me or anything, so I was
Mhm.
actually quite taken back that someone would nominate me for something.
Yeah. No, it's a good case, and as you mentioned, that you had a lot of interesting data to present, and it worked out in the end. And I think it's something that the tenacity of being able to put all that together, and you certainly helped solve this case.
Definitely.
All right, let's move on to the Super Bowl then, because as I mentioned in the beginning, you just got done with that, and that's always a big crazy event for cities to handle is Super Bowl, and it's not most people think it's just one night, but it's not. Super Bowl week, you have different festivities going on all week long, and so it's a big strain on the law enforcement and fire to be,
Absolutely.
all eyes are on you for a whole entire week.
Well, and
So,
it's crazy because the Super Bowl actually took place in Glendale, but Phoenix had a week of events leading up to the Super Bowl, and at the same time, you had the Waste Management Open in Scottsdale. So you had two major events
yeah.
in the valley within the same week. So it was very taxing on all the law enforcement and fire because of just the increased volume of people and gatherings and just stuff going on in general.
All right. Good. And then what were you tasked to do?
So I was assigned to the Intelligence Operations Center, also known as the IOC, at the FBI building in Phoenix, and I worked with a group of analysts from the FBI and then some other state and local analysts. So it's there, everybody's just basically in a room and you're kind of assessing information as it comes in and determining, is it credible, do we need to have follow-up, do they have a nexus to Phoenix, and just it's lots of research and obviously because Phoenix had so many events going on, the threats to the city or whether or not they were warranted, they were still coming in. So you still have to look at everything and just make sure everybody's going to be safe and do your due diligence to make sure you're looking at everything that comes in.
Yeah, I think that's lost on the public in general, just how many threats a city gets, especially when they're hosting an event like this.
Yeah. Yep. And it's good that I mean, I guess to a sense, it's good that the public isn't worried about it and they're getting out there and living their lives and enjoying the
Hmm.
festivities. But, a lot of hard work goes on behind closed doors to make sure that everybody is safe, with law enforcement out there and fire responding to medical calls because people are dehydrated or whatever the case may be. A lot of work goes into the events that are planned for, especially something as big as Phoenix. And then you have your other incidents that aren't related to the festivities but happen in that footprint. And so you have to worry about those unintentional criminal acts that you're also responding to.
Hmm.
It was a busy week. I'm glad it's over.
Yeah. So you mentioned there was a couple of different locations because I guess I didn't think about that as well, that the actual Super Bowl was in Glendale, but Phoenix held different activities.
They did,
So
yeah.
was
They had the NFL experience at Hans Park, and
hmm
then the day of the Super Bowl, they had the NFL viewing experience in Hans Park, and then there was just all kinds of other events throughout Phoenix during the week. Then we had some guy who decided he was going to free climb the Chase building. That
just
was an entertaining and large scale response in itself, and And I was just sitting there minding my own business at the IOC, and I had a few different federal agencies saying, hey, why is there so many fire responding to the Chase building? I'm like, I don't know, let me look into it. And then like we turn on the TV and this guy's just climbing up the outside of the building. No harness, no nothing. Live streaming it on his social media accounts. And I said, well, there you go. That's why there's so many fire personnel at the Chase
Oh,
building.
geez. So he's just a thrill seeker?
He had, I don't remember the name of the cause that he was climbing for, but he's a well-known free climber that supports this cause. I think it was something, I don't know if it was an anti-abortion or something. I'm pretty sure it was anti-abortion that he was just trying to bring awareness to. So I think he's done this in other states as well.
Well, I hope he has somebody that pays his fines.
Yeah, I know, right? Between that and the streaker who jumped in the lake at the Waste Management Open.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I guess the underwear company paid for his bail because that's all he was wearing when he jumped into the lake was a pair of underwear, and that company decided to help him out of his legal problems.
Oh, geez. See, that's setting a bad precedent.
I wonder if their sales went up at all, though.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, if they did, I mean, good for him then, if that's what really happened. But to me, you're just asking people to do crazy stuff to get stuff paid for. But
Yep, yeah, exactly. Bad idea.
Oh, jeez. All right. Well, let's move on. Let's do the call-in segment now. And this is favorite first jobs. The idea for this came to me from when I interviewed Steve Gottlieb, and he was 16, 17 years old. And his favorite first job was being a radio DJ for a Sunday morning show at his local hometown. And so I like to ask people what their favorite first job. And so I was thinking about one of my favorite first jobs. When I was in college, I delivered meals in a refrigerated tube. It was like a Meals on Wheels program. It was meals delivered to children in need. The radio didn't work in the truck. So, and of course, this is before cell phones. I had nothing on me. It's just me and my thoughts as I'm delivering all this food. They basically told me, like, hey, you grab some chocolate milk for yourself. So it was just me as a little kid just driving this box truck around town drinking chocolate milk. Do you have a favorite first job?
Oh my gosh. I think the most memorable job I had was when I was 17. I worked at a bagel shop. So I'm from New Jersey. And, bagels and delis and bakeries in New Jersey are like the heartbeat of people. Like they just need good food. When I moved to Arizona, I was really disappointed in what my options were for food out here. I almost actually moved back to New Jersey. But the bagel shop I worked at when I was 17 was such a fun group of teenagers, and we would just blast the music in the morning, bake the bagels, and then, all day it was just, cream cheese or butter.
Man, see, but Arizona is a big retirement community, so you probably could bring the New Jersey bagel down there to Arizona and be a pretty good business.
It could be, yeah. There's the bagel shops here are few and far between, but I do have one by my house that gives you that inch thick layer of cream cheese on your bagel, just that authentic New Jersey, carb it up, cream cheese it up, enjoy your breakfast kind of deal.
Man, no, that does sound good. All right. All right. So first on the line is Beverly. Beverly, what's one of your favorite first jobs?
I was a job coach for people with disabilities.
Anything memorable from that?
Just at the fact that I deeply admire people with disabilities. They work harder and really try and dedicate themselves to their jobs, maybe sometimes when other people take their jobs for granted.
Yeah. So then we just talked about jobs that were just really fun and in the service industry. And then Beverly comes along and has this really deep, very important first job where she's working with folks that are in need.
That was super serious compared to where we just came from.
Yeah, but I think she has a good point, though.
She
I mean,
does.
when
She
you
does.
get, just like teaching or any kind of volunteer group, or when you're working with a large group of people, if you get certain people that are just working hard and are dedicated to whatever they're trying to do, it is inspiring.
Yeah, it is definitely.
All right. Let's move on to Shauna. Shauna, what's one of your favorite first jobs?
One of my favorite first jobs was working as a cashier at a large grocery store. I loved the fact that I could come in, interact with a whole bunch of people, and go home and not take any of it with me. And when I'm having a bad day in the office, I always think, I'm going to go be a cashier again. That's how I get through my bad days, is dreaming about being a cashier.
So I guess the grass is always greener on the other side, right?
I don't know. I don't like people bagging my groceries. I prefer the self-checkout line. But, it's good to see that was a favorable job for her.
Yeah, no, it is fascinating because she seems very people person-y.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah, she
like,
does. She has that perky tone in her voice.
Yeah, and I'm like, I enjoy working from home and not talking to that many people.
That's exactly how I am. I prefer to not go into the office if I can help it because I like the comfort of my own living room.
Yeah, but it is. I mean, hey, you think back, and it's the nostalgia factor, right? And so when you have those bad days in your career or life, and you think back of a time that it was much simpler.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah, that's true too. All right, let's move on to Barry. Barry, what's one of your favorite first jobs?
Without a doubt, my favorite job was as a navigator on a Navy destroyer. First off, to get this out of the way, I had very good people on that team. Any job you have when you've got good people backing you up, it's that much better. But the other thing was, this was in the late 70s, and we were just getting global positioning systems, what we now call GIS. So on any given workday, I was navigating the same way Columbus was doing it and the same way that folks are now doing it with their cell phones. And I just found that really fun.
Yeah, that's another awe-inspiring first job. I mean,
absolutely. I love GIS. I don't know that I would want to do it like Christopher Columbus did, though.
I don't. I mean, I bellyache on this show all the time about having to geocode and the system failing and crashing and me wanting to throw the whole computer out the window. So, let alone what he's talking about. He's talking about late 70s, which is before I was born. And so it's,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, but it's still, 18, 19, 20 years old on that naval ship. And again, working with a bunch of great people with like a common cause.
Yeah, I think it's good when you have a good group of people that you work with. It just makes going to work so much more fun.
Yeah, definitely. All right, then let's move on to Dawn. Dawn, what's one of your favorite first jobs?
Definitely Tripoli Bakery. I loved the cannolis there and would definitely get a few in between during my breaks. So Tripoli Bakery, 100%.
Yeah, that's one thing, man. If my retirement job is at like a bakery or at something like that, I am gaining like 20 pounds.
Yeah. Oh no, way more than 20. I have no control when it comes to cannolis, especially.
So good. And to me, if you're working there and then you get either discount or free food, like, oh man, all those pastries, it would not be good for me. So
Yeah.
I guess
when I was at the bagel shop there, it was just like free for all. You just bagels every day.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like like Panera Bread, they give out at the end of every night, they give out their bread to homeless associations.
Well,
but there's always stuff left over, at the end of the day. But I'm sure their employees get some stuff too. But yeah, that's all carbs.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. All goody carbs. So, all right. Last but certainly not least is Jessica. Jessica, what's one of your favorite first jobs?
So I worked at a dry cleaner in high school, and when the clothes had been left there for more than 30 days, we were allowed to take them if we paid the cleaning bill. So I supplemented quite a bit of my wardrobe with really cute finds from the dry cleaners, only for $1 because that's how much it cost to clean them.
That is a really good fringe benefit.
I'm thinking of picking up a part-time job at the dry cleaner right now.
Yeah, but
Is
I'm
that a
surprised.
standard practice? Can I find out if that's a standard practice?
Yeah, just call up the dry cleaner, right? They might not hire you if that's your first question, but I'm actually kind of surprised that it was only 30 days.
Yeah,
That
that's true.
seems
Well,
really
don't they
short.
have that? They have that on the slip, don't they?
Yeah, yeah. There's something like that. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is 30. It's
They
been a
start the
while.
clock. They start the clock as soon as you drop that stuff off.
Yeah, so that is interesting. And to pay $1 for that, just to say you got it. Hey, again, if you like fashion but can't afford the retail price, that is a good way to find yourself into a bunch of new clothes.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, good. All right, so that's favorite first jobs. If you have a favorite first job that you want to share with us, email the show at leapodcast@gmail.com. All right, finishing up, Jennifer, then with personal interests. And this makes me smile. You have mini donkeys.
I do. I have 3 mini donkeys, and I got them 4 or 5 years ago. My husband and I live on a county island, so we have an acre property, and I said, I'm getting farm animals if we get this house. And he's like, I just want the shop. I'm like, all right. So sure enough, I started, mingling with the neighbors and meeting people, and there was a family on the street next to us who had some mini donkeys, and she's like, oh, they're rescues. And I was like, we can rescue mini donkeys. And my husband's like, no. And I'm like, no, you said I can have it. I can have farm animals. So yeah, we rescued 2 female adults from New Mexico, and one of them was pregnant. So we have a mini baby donkey and 2 adult donkeys.
Okay, so when you say mini, I'm trying to envision how big are mini donkeys?
So the textbook definition of a mini donkey is 36 inches high or less. So if their back is 36 inches or less, they're a mini donkey. So mine would probably be right on the border of being a mini donkey because they're pretty big.
So it's not the height from the ground.
Yeah, from the ground to
Oh, it
to
is.
their back. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it is the height from the ground.
Yeah.
Okay.
hmm
So so at 3 feet, yeah, that's like it's like a
Yeah.
dog, bigger
They're
dog. Yeah.
they're very well, they're definitely bigger. So they mingle great with my dogs. I have 3
hmm
dogs.
hmm
And they all get along great. They're just very sassy girls. When they say donkeys are stubborn, yes, they are very stubborn, and mine are very sassy. They'll just yell right at you if
All
you
right.
if you try to tell them where to go.
All right. So what's the advantages of having mini donkeys?
They make me happy. So there's really it's kind of like your dog. I mean, what do they really do? They make you happy.
Yeah.
They're fun to watch when they're playing, and they have personality differences between the 3 of them. Watching them run around the yard and jump on each other and chase the dogs. It's just entertaining, and donkeys are actually right up there with horses for therapy animals. So they have that very gentle nature as well. So they can see, they can sense when you're having a bad day and kind of snuggle up with you. So I don't really have a functional purpose other than that they make me happy.
Nice. All right. So our last segment to the show is Words to the World. And this is where I give the guests the last word. Jennifer, you can promote any idea that you wish. What are your words to the world?
I think don't be afraid to start at the bottom. Don't be afraid to go for something you might not quite know where it's going to lead. Some of the best adventures are ones that were unplanned.
Very good. Well, I leave every guest with you've given me just enough to talk bad about you later. But I do appreciate you being on the show, Jennifer. Thank you so much, and you be safe.
Thanks, you too.